So I've been getting a lot of questions on acoustic foam, acoustic panels, where you should put them. Should you leave an air gap between them? Can you put stuff behind? Can you put stuff inside? Just to make it work better. And in this video, I'll be answering some of these questions from you if you should do all these things, if it's actually worth it, if you get a good return on your investment versus just buying something maybe better than what you already have or what you're planning to purchase if they are, something a little bit less expensive that you want to make modifications to. Is it worth it? Let's find out. So the first question is, should you leave an air gap between the acoustic panel and the wall? Now, I've been getting a lot of people telling me that, I should really leave a big air gap between the acoustic panel and the wall. Now in this basement right here, I have 12 of these acoustic panels. Now these acoustic panels are, yes, flush against the wall. And let's just say that I built this, and you can build them too for less than $20 each. Whereas you would buy one for about $100. So if you want to learn how to build your own, especially if you have to have about a dozen in a room, it really saves you a lot of money if you can just build them yourself. It's really an easy process, and you don't really need that much material. It's all stuff that you can buy from your local hardware store, really. So video right up there, and I'll also leave links in the description below on everything I talk about in this video. So again, the first question is, should you leave an air gap between the wall and the acoustic panel? Will it make a huge difference? Well, it will make a little bit of a difference. The thing is, will you be able to actually hear the difference with your own ears? That is subjective because it all depends on the type of room that you have acoustic panels in. In this room, I'm not dealing with too many low frequencies or high frequency noises. This pretty well in the mid frequency noise. So here I have all of my acoustic panels directly flush against the wall, and I found that it made a really good difference. But in this room, it just wouldn't look good to have the panels floating a couple of inches from the wall. It just doesn't look good, and I just chose not to do that because I didn't have too many lower frequency noise. Now, if you have very low frequency noise, which causes a lot of vibration, then you will see a little bit of a benefit by having the acoustic panel a little bit away from the wall. So without getting too technical and boring you to death with all these numbers and explaining how sound works and frequencies, just imagine the sound waves are bouncing everywhere on flat surfaces. So you have a room with no panels, everything's bouncing, and you will most likely hear an echo. Where I find that the air gap is of the best benefit is on the ceiling. And you'll probably notice that if you go places where they have huge high ceilings and would typically have a lot of echo in the room, you have these types of floating acoustic panels. They float a few inches from the ceiling, sometimes, well, usually it's at least 4 inches from the ceiling. Most of the time it's a little bit more, but if you have a small room, having 4 inches from the ceiling to the acoustic panel will actually help a little bit to eliminate that echo, to eliminate those frequencies. That is where you will find the biggest improvement is from ceiling acoustic panels. Now, some of you might disagree with me, but really it all depends on what type of room that you're using it for and how your sound actually works. If you have a room where you're just using it as a media room, then having that extra airspace isn't really going to make a huge difference. Not something that you'll be able to really hear or notice. If you can afford losing space in your room and you don't mind it not looking as good as if you had it flush against the wall, then by all means do it. And the rule of thumb for how much space you should leave between an acoustic panel and the wall is basically the thickness of the acoustic panel. Like this acoustic panel is about 2 inches, so you leave it about 2 inches from the wall. And all of this raises another question on what you should do, because should you go and buy a 1-inch panel and leave a 1-inch gap, or should you just buy a 2-inch panel and leave no gap at all? Well, the answer is buying a 2-inch panel will be of better benefit than buying a 1-inch panel and leaving that gap. It will also look better. It will cost you a little bit more money, but it will be worth it. But basically that's what my experience have taught me, and I haven't personally been into a room where it made a huge difference having the panels a few inches from the wall, except for the ones on the ceiling. So another question is, should I leave an air gap between the wall and the bass traps in the corner of the room? Because am I not trying to get rid of a lower frequency with those bass traps? And as I said before, lower frequencies will get better results if you leave an air gap. With the bass straps though, it really doesn't give you much of anything because usually bass straps on the corner are already quite thick. You can get some that are made of foam, as you can see on your screen. You just stick them right on the corner, or you can get the thicker bass straps that are actually made like an acoustic panel. And also those are quite large. You can get some that are, I think, a 6" by 6" square, and you don't leave an air gap with that. You just stick it right in the corner of the wall, and it works the very best. Now, another question that some people ask when trying to save a little bit of money, and listen, I understand you want to save some money. These acoustic foam are a lot less expensive than a panel. They don't work as well, but they do work, especially if you have a lot. That's the thing. You need a lot of these to do the same thing as one of those. So one person asked, if I bought a bunch of acoustic foam and I bought a roll of mass-loaded vinyl, can I stick the mass-loaded vinyl, cut it the shape of these foams, and stick it behind it and leave it on the wall? Will that have a better impact on acoustics in the room than just putting regular acoustic foam? Well, mass-loaded vinyl, if you're not really sure what it is, you can click that video right up there. But usually most people use mass-loaded vinyl as a sound blocker. And it does absorb some sound because of the way it's made. It's a rubbery compound, it's dense, but it is mostly used for a sound blocker. And this will not really help do much for these acoustic foam other than making the cost of these acoustic foam go a lot higher, because I'll leave links in the description below. You can go check out mass-loaded vinyl and you'll see that they are quite expensive. So another question that some people have been asking me is that you can buy acoustic panels that have a built-in air gap inside of them. So if you'd have a 4" acoustic panel, you'd have some insulation here. You'd have probably an 1.5" of insulation, then an inch of air gap, and then more insulation in the middle. I don't think that there's much benefit to be had by buying an acoustic panel that already has an air gap inside, because you're going to pay a lot more money for that acoustic panel. And are you going to be hearing that much benefit by almost doubling your price of that acoustic panel? Most likely not. What I would suggest is, if you do have a little bit more money to spend, then go ahead and buy the acoustic panels or build them yourself. And instead of getting some that are gimmicky with a air gap in the middle, just go ahead and buy a thicker acoustic panel. That's what I would suggest. Just go ahead and buy a 3 or even 4" acoustic panel. If you're really trying to deaden the sound inside a large room, then you can go and add an air gap in behind. It's way more cost effective than to add your own air gap than to buy an acoustic panel with a built-in air gap. If you really can't let go of the notion that you need an air gap, then I would suggest just have an air gap and skip the acoustic panel that already has a built-in air gap. Save yourself some money, and you should be pretty happy with the results if you just do that. So if you have any questions regarding anything acoustic, soundproofing, or you just want to insult me, please leave it in the comment section below, and I will do my very best to answer you within the first week of this video being published. I'm really trying. I get a lot of comments, so I'm really trying to, when I push publish on a video, I try to answer every question that comes in, especially within the first 24 hours or 48 hours, but also as the week goes on, the first 7 days before I publish my next video, I try to answer every question that I can.